Boom! Welcome into Sports Bet Betting Insight today, Thursday, July 28th. Pauly and Teddy, big game breakdown. Huge series, believe it or not, in Miami. Cardinals and the Marlins and the White Sox and the Cubs. Deep dive. We finish it out. All the NFL teams done. Washington Redskins to finish it out. And remember, next week, our only vacation. We're off for a week. The only time we take off. And when we come back, it's hardcore football as the football season will be underway, and we'll actually have our first game to talk about with the Packers and the Colts. Bad beats and bad bets. Let's start with a lot of bad bets. It was a big day for some big dogs, and the Blue Jays, $2, Teddy. R.A. Dickey had nothing.
The betting markets really should have watched our show yesterday. Honestly. What did we say on yesterday's show? Knuckleball pitchers cannot be big dogs or big chalk. What happens? Well, Blue Jays go off minus $2. There's a lot of randomness with knuckleballers. Whether their game is on can be purely random. I mean, look, there were times in this game it almost looked like Dickey was pitching underhanded. As you look at this photo, obviously that's a flip to first base. Bottom line, 5.2 innings, 7 runs, 2 home runs allowed, 4 walks, and the Blue Jays get annihilated at home as $2 chalk. But, Pauly, they weren't the only big favorite to go down yesterday. In fact, 9 of the 15 baseball games had underdogs cash, and several of them were pretty big plus prices.
The misery continues for the Giants. Mad Bum and the Giants were minus 250 against the Reds, and they lose 2-1. The Giants have lost 3 straight starts by Bumgartner, and Straley got the best of them in this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ice-cold lineup coming out of the break.
Sure.
You can't lay minus 250 with ice-cold lineups. You can't do it. San Fran's playing bad baseball. The race was on the hill last week. They lost with them. The race was on the hill yesterday. They lost with them. And meanwhile, look at Cincinnati very quietly. We were mocking that Reds bullpen for, 2 months earlier in the season.
Rightfully
how bad it was. Guess what? Entering this series with San Fran, that bullpen, now that the starting pitching staff has gotten healthier, the bullpen had a 2.42 ERA in the month of July. Iglesias and Segrani shut down the door on Wednesday. Here's a quote from manager Brian Price. We talk about it a lot, the pitching staff we envision. We're getting closer. And, of course, Jay Bruce, whose name has been bandied about a lot before the trading deadline, he might have played his way onto a contender. 6 home runs in the last 5 games. He's been red hot as the Reds have been making their supporters money. And, of course, not so much for the Giants.
Here's another one. An audition for Matt Moore. Dodgers were $1.70. Rays beat them. Dodgers can't hit lefties.
No, the Dodgers are $1.70 against a lefty. Look, the Dodgers are tied for number 29 in OPS versus lefties. Only Atlanta is worse. You don't even mention in the same breath as Atlanta in any statistical categories this year. There are 11 wins year-to-date versus Southpaws. That's the 3rd lowest in the National League, behind the Phillies and the Reds, tied with the Braves. Again, 3 teams you don't want to be drawing comparisons to, and yet they're minus 170 against Matt Moore. Matt Moore's been good.
Yeah.
Matt Moore might have pitched his way onto the Dodgers. There's talk that he's going to stay in L.A. If they can work out a trade with Toronto, or with Tampa Bay, I should say. And the Rays, they got to win. I'm not going to say they desperately need it, but their road trip went south in a hurry. They got a nice win before they came home. They still have the major's 3rd worst record and the team's worst mark after 100 games since 2007. But Matt Moore, he said it, look, since the All-Star break, we played a lot closer to the true colors of our team, and Tampa certainly has played a good notch or two better over the last couple of weeks than they played for most of June and July.
The bad bets continue. The Orioles, the Rockies win again. They should have swept this series. Nice price here as an underdog. And the Orioles do it again. 15 straight unders.
15 consecutive unders for Baltimore. And yet we continue to see the markets completely ignore this streak. When you have winning streaks or losing streaks, team wins 15 games in a row, doesn't matter if they're the last place team, they're going to be the lead story on SportsCenter.
Yep.
Team goes under 15 games in a row, nobody notices. That's the case with the Baltimore right now. I hope you've been riding this streak. We talked about it on yesterday's show. We're going to talk about it again today.
Yep.
Maybe we'll be talking about it again tomorrow.
Yeah, fun show continues. A lot of good stuff here right off the bat. The Twins cannot be laying this kind of price again. Braves win.
Again, something we talked about on yesterday's show. Yesterday they were $2, or I should say 2 days ago they were $2. Yesterday they were only, about a minus 165, minus 70 for Minnesota. Minnesota can't be -7, 170 against anybody.
No.
And the whole concept of betting against Atlanta, the place to bet against Atlanta is at home, not on the highway. Well, the Braves did do their best to blow a big lead in that ball game. They still got the money. The Minnesota backers, I don't know if there were many of them, but Minnesota backers took an ugly defeat.
One bad beat, and it's for the sports books in this Mets-Cardinals total. Familia finally blows a save. Tough result for the Mets. That was a big loss. What happened here with this total, Teddy? Explain.
Well, finally blew a save. Familia had 52 straight saves dating back to July 30th of last year. When you don't blow a save in a calendar year and you get 52 straight, and you finally blow one, and it ends up costing the books a fortune, that's brutal.
Yeah.
So this is what happened, all right? This is total, was sitting at 8. It got bet all the way up to 9. A ton of over money. And it was wrong, 3-1 in the bottom of the 7th. And you got 2 solid bullpens, expected to close out that game in low-scoring fashion. But then the Mets scored 3 in the bottom of the 7th. Of course, they get the 1 on the wild pitch. We've seen a lot of runs scored on wild pitches.
Yeah, it's an epidemic lately.
And then, of course, Familia blows the save in the 9th. The final goes 5-4. All the bettors win. If you bet it over 8, you win. If you bet it over 8.5 in the win. And then whoever took back under 9 pushed. Not a good result for the house. Just about every total bet anyone made either won or pushed.
Yep, bingo. NFL news. Hey, the Jets did the right thing. Fitzpatrick, 1 year, $12 million. It's also he can make $3 million in incentives, so we can make up to $15 million. The Jets finally do the right thing here. And after that bizarre report earlier in the day yesterday that the players weren't allowed to talk about the situation. Give me a break.
Yeah, but more importantly, what we're going to see is an immediate impact on the Jets' odds. I've already checked. We've seen money come in on the Jets over, where there's been nothing but under money for the last month on the Jets' season win total. We haven't seen a move on week 1 yet. I expect that we will see some weak money for the Jets. You're talking about power rating the Jets with Ryan Fitzpatrick versus power rating the Jets versus Geno Smith. The Jets have to be a point or 2 or 3 higher now that they've signed their starting quarterback, the guy that all the veterans were saying, you better get into camp.
Yeah, here's a move that makes 0 sense. There were offers for Nick Foles. The Rams could have traded him. Then yesterday he asked to be cut, and they say, okay, fine.
There were offers for Foles. The offers for Foles were coming in around the draft, and St. Louis could have could have gotten something in return. This is the guy. Remember, last year, not like 5 years ago, last year they extended Foles for $24.5 million. In March, all right, when you're supposed to make a decision what you're going to do with your roster, they paid him a $3 million roster bonus, and then by the time late July and August rolled around, Foles was like, cut me. They're like, okay. He did take a bit of reduction from the guaranteed money that St. Louis, I keep saying that, that L.A. Gave him. And it's going to take, it might take a week or two. I haven't been saying the Rams enough. We haven't been talking about it enough. Yeah. But the bottom line is he's probably going to sign as a backup somewhere. They're not going to have to give him all of that guaranteed money. But when you're talking about an organization making smart moves, an organization making dumb moves, L.A. probably a smart move for ownership to move the franchise to L.A. In terms of putting this roster together, not so much. This is a lot of wasted money for a team that already has salary cap problems.
Yes, all right. That was a fun segment. Up next, big game breakdown. We'll kick it off with the Cardinals and the Marlins, and we'll get to the Redskins team preview on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Hey, SportsBit viewers, Teddy and Pauly are great, but do you want to watch a second sports betting show that's great, entertaining, and where people really know what they're talking about? So do we. So if you know of one, hit me up on Twitter and let me know what it is. Right?
I love it. Come on aboard, guys. That was fucking great.
Back on SportsBit, time for big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. All right, here we go. Cardinals, Marlins. Waka against Fernandez. Marlins $1.85. 7 the total at home. The Marlins, huge series. Marlins with a 1-game lead over the Cardinals in the wild card. They're only 4 back of the Nationals in the division. And you see the smile here by Fernandez. Not only is he smiling, but everyone who bets on him before every home game is smiling because he's 26-1 career at home.
Sick number. Not just 26-1, 26-1 with a 1.47 ERA at home. He has almost twice as many strikeouts, 296, as hits allowed, 154, in his career in Miami. The Marlins are 32-5 in his 37 home starts. Do you see Jose Fernandez priced minus $3, minus $4, minus $5 as a 32-5 record might indicate? No, doesn't happen. But I'm telling you, Pauly, this Marlins team right now, I like so much about Miami, especially because they didn't play their best baseball in the first half.
No.
I think they're a wild card team. I think they might even win this division, especially with D. Gordon, now that his 80-game suspension is done, back on the roster as of tonight. D. Gordon, an absolute spark plug at the top of that order. They've missed him. I thought his absence was at least a part of the reason why Stanton struggled for so long over the first half of the season. That's not the case now. Miami has all the looks of a bet on. And, of course, the timing of Gordon's return really matters. Derek Dietrich, he was solid early at second base, but gosh, he's in a 4 of 35 slump since the All-Star break with 12 strikeouts. And, of course, those 4 hits, 3 of them came in one game. So bringing D. Gordon back into the lineup and sitting Dietrich down is going to be a net positive, a big net positive for a Marlins team that, in my mind, is primed to make a second-half run.
Well, wild. I mean, we've been talking about it on SportsBit. Chen's been awful. Stanton was hitting 220, no D. Gordon. And there they are right there in the thick of the playoff race. For the Cardinals, they thought Walker was going to come back fresh and with some pop. That hasn't been the case at all.
No. I mean, this guy was 17-7 with a 3.38 ERA last year. This year he's 5-7 with a 4.37 ERA. And the first 2 back after the All-Star break. He got a nice break, take some time, hope you're fresh. No, a 4.5 ERA through 10 innings is not awful, but more than twice as many hits, 17 hits allowed in those 10 innings, as strikeouts, only 8. And the first game back was a 6-3 loss to these same Marlins. No decision for Waka, but he threw 101 pitches. 101 pitches, Paul. You know how long he lasted? 4 innings.
Yep.
St. Louis does have some positive momentum. They did snap Familia's 52-game streak in consecutive saves last night. They did take 2 out of 3 at Citi Field. And obviously, when it comes to playing in big games, St. Louis a lot more experience than Miami in recent seasons.
Yeah.
So you can make a case for the underdog here, but boy, really hard for me to make a case betting against Jose Fernandez at home.
Yep. Any cliche you want to use. Big game players make big plays and all the experience backs against the wall. All that's true with the Cardinals. LiveOddsSportsbookReview.com. White Sox and the Cubs from Wrigley. No overnight totals at Wrigley. Cubs $1.30. It's Sale against Lackey. And I had no problem. We had no problem with what Sale did. The question is now, after the apology, and he actually ripped Ventura too, how much does the downtime affect his rhythm?
Well, yeah, he's only going to be pitching for the second time in 20 days. That's a long layoff for any starting pitcher, and it's obviously going to take Chris Sale out of his normal rhythm. We're seeing him priced in this game as an underdog, which is something we don't see from Chris Sale very often, but anyone that plays against the Cubs at Wrigley is an underdog these days. I'm going to read, and this is a long quote. So I'm going to take my time. I'm going to read this quote because I think it's meaningful.
Okay.
It's talking about the mentality of Sale and the mentality of the modern athletes in the whole shenanigans where he cut up the uniforms, where both you and I supported his decision to do so. Here's his quote. When I saw that there was something in the way of that 100% winning mentality, I had an issue. I tried to bring it up and say, hey, listen, these are my thoughts and concerns. And they got pushed away because of the business deal that was set in place. I'll never understand why we need to do something on the business side, on the field, that might impede us winning a game. Sale continued. The 76 uniforms they were supposed to wear, they're the ones that he cut up.
Yep.
They're uncomfortable and unorthodox. I didn't want to go out there and not be at the top of my game in every aspect that I need to be in. Not only that, I didn't want anything to alter my mechanics. There are a lot of different things that went into it. Looking bad had absolutely zero to do with it. Nothing. And you know what? Mm-hmm. This is kind of what we said when we talked about it when it happened, Paul. Sales like, look, it's about winning. It's not about wearing some uniform sales or some merchandise apparel deal that you signed contracted for the ownership to make money. He had every right to do what he did, even though it didn't work out particularly well for him. But He wants to win. That's what players are supposed to want to do. I don't blame Sale. I blame management for, doing what management does. Sucking up to get an extra buck instead of making things right for their employees.
All right. He told them before the season, do not pitch me on a throwback jersey day. And they did it anyways. And he said, and he even told them before, I don't like these. It's a problem. And then all hell broke loose. Now, teams are asking about Robertson and if the White Sox have given up on the season. Remember, they were in that win-now mode when they picked up Shields. They're a game under 500. They're 8 back of Cleveland. They're 6 out of the wild card. 61 games to play. Who knows? Maybe someone makes them a great offer. Dodgers, Rangers, and they trade Sale. Who knows?
See, that's the thing. I mean, there's so much discussion about the trading deadline and who are buyers and who are sellers. If you're somewhere in contention, and the White Sox is not hopeless for Chicago. Let's not forget, last year at this time, there were a couple teams. I guess Toronto had already made their move. Texas was just starting to make their move. There were a handful of teams that didn't look all that good in late July that ended up being postseason squad. It's about getting hot down the stretch. There's 61 games left. There's 6 games out of a wild card with 61 left. To me, that's still in the race, and that's not wave the white flag and sell off all of our parts.
Yes, now this is why I'm very concerned about the Cubs in October. They've lost 4 straight starts by Arrieta. Lester's has all his problems we've talked about on SportsBet. The issue's just getting out to the 5th inning. And now Lackey, the adrenaline's wearing off. He has been brutal. Look at this graphic. Lackey, first 13 starts, 7-2 with a 2.66. Last 7 starts, 0-5 with an ERA of 6 and change. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that, again, we keep patting ourselves on the back on today's show, but man, there's a lot of stuff that we've said over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months that's come to fruition. I remember talking about Lackey, a month and a half ago, saying this guy's, he's 38 years old, his stats are way off the charts from where they've been.
Yep.
There's probably going to be some regression here, and that's exactly what we've seen. This is a guy whose strikeout per 9 rate last year was 7.2. This year went up to 9.2. The average fastball rate, 91.9, the highest in 10 years. That stat can't last when you're 38 years old to pitch in the middle of the summer, and it hasn't. The ground ball rate now below 40% for the first time in the last 10 years, and I wonder if he came out throwing too hard and kind of now he's tired and it's wearing off a little bit. Yeah. The Cubs slumped into the break. They won their first 2 games out of the break, but they're only 5-5 in their last 10 since. Not a team I'm in any rush to lay a price with John Lackey on the hill against Chris Sale.
I agree with all of that. Washington Redskins deep dive and the play of the day. We wrap it up next on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Always on the go? Bet365 has one of the top mobile platforms in today's market. Sign up today and don't let your busy life keep you out of the game.
All right, it's been a long journey. Our final team preview in the NFL. NFC East, we put it to bed after today. Redskins, over under 7.5 wins. Last year, 9-7 straight up, 9-7 ATS, 9-7 over under. Won the division. Mainstream stats, 17 in offense, 28 in defense, 26 yards per play, 14th in turnovers. A legitimate question here, though, Teddy. Were the Redskins any good?
Honestly, I mean, look at the stats. Again, number 17 on offense, number 28 on defense, minus 0.4 yards per play, 26th in the NFL. Those aren't good stats. So what did they do last year? They took advantage of an incredibly weak division. The Cowboys stunk. The Eagles stunk. The Giants found ways to lose every possible game that they could lose. Look at the wins last year. They beat the Rams. They beat the Eagles twice. They beat the Bucks. Team with losing record. The Saints losing record. G-Men losing record. Bears losing record. Bills 500. Cowboys losing record. I guess you call the signature win out of their 9 victories was beating Buffalo at home.
Oh.
And just to know where they were power rated in December, all right, they were +4 at Chicago and +3 at home versus the Bills the following week. So that's where this team was at last year. No, they weren't good. And let's not forget, you want to talk about a franchise with a history of futility in recent years? The last time they had back-to-back winning seasons, remember, they went 9-7 last year. Last back-to-back winning seasons was 1996 and 1997.
Jesus.
Their last back-to-back playoff appearances, 1991 and 1992. That's when they were still winning Super Bowls before anyone had ever heard of Daniel Snyder. Got 2 playoff wins since winning the 1991 Super Bowl. They beat the Lions in 1999, and they beat the Bucks in 2005. a lot of futility for Washington. And last year, they were the best team in the division. That's not saying all that much.
Well, and also the markets were right about this team when they played an elite team, a top team. Remember, a real team, whatever you want to say. When the Packers went to D.C. in the playoffs, they beat them up pretty good. The only other good teams they played, Patriots and the Panthers. There was a combined 71-26 margin, 2 blowouts there, and they chose not to give Kirk Cousins a long-term deal. Not only that, they lowballed him. So they actually think they can go out and grab another quarterback, and this guy, 24 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in his last 11 games.
And that's 315 pass attempts during that span, 70% completions, and a 101.6 QB rating. Now you say, can Kirk Cousins do that again? Well, let's see. Before he went into last year, he had more career interceptions, 19, than touchdowns, 18. So a 24-3 TD to INT ratio over that last 11 reminds me of one of those runs that we see quarterbacks have from time to time. It's very, very difficult for even Kirk Cousins, who was clutch last year, to do it again. Let's put it this way. And I don't blame Washington for not paying him the big bucks. To give him a 1-year deal, prove it. Now, the one advantage that Cousins had, this is a loaded receiving core. It's a really loaded receiving core. Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon and Jamison Crowder. They get Josh Doxson out wide. Plenty of depth behind Jordan Reed at tight end. There aren't many receiving cores in the NFL that are deeper and more explosive than what Washington brings to the table. But unfortunately for the Redskins, they may have the best receiving core in the NFL, or one of the best. They probably have the worst looking running backs. They had the worst running game in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look a whole lot better. The offensive line weakness wasn't addressed in the offseason. They have the left tackle, Trent Williams. He's Pro Bowl caliber. Brandon Sheriff was the number 1 draft choice last year, had a decent rookie season. But, you got Corey Lichtensteiger coming off an injury, played campaign at center, and nothing certain in the other 2 spots. Nothing at all.
Now, defense, the big move, huge. They get Josh Norman from Carolina, swagger guy, locker room leader. They also took Kendall Fuller, cornerback, 3rd round out of Virginia Tech, recovering from surgery, 1st-round pick talent. They lost Junior Gillette. We talked about that. They're working out. Maybe Greg Hardy goes here. Who knows? As back-to-back years with Gillette with the Achilles. And they lost 3 starting defensive linemen in the offseason. So that's an issue there as well. Tell us about the schedule.
Well, yeah, one more point on that defense. They lost 3 starting defensive linemen, and they added nothing in the draft. The only guy they got in free agency was Kendall Reyes from San Diego. It is a clear unit of weakness. Yeah, Josh Norman, you love the addition. You love the addition of Kendall Fuller if he's healthy. But this front 7 on defense is well below average, period. Oh, here's another thing not to like about Washington.
Yep.
Last year's schedule, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the weakest in the NFL. This year, how about one of the toughest? It is the 2nd biggest strength of schedule jump from year to year in the NFL on a percentage basis. Only the Jets faced a bigger increase. Look at this. From week 8 on, they play Cincy and London. They have a bye. They have Minnesota, Green Bay, short week at Dallas, at Arizona, at Philly, Carolina. They go 2-5. They did a good job in that stretch. They'll be underdogs in each and every one of those ball games, with the exception of the game at Philly, in which, depending on what that's late December. It's hard to project there, but if the Eagles are playing poorly, they could be favored there, but they'll be chalk win in one of those games, maybe 2 at the most. It's a real tough back half of the slate for the Redskins, even if they do get off to a hot start. And you look at that first half of that schedule, not like it's easy there either.
Nope.
They're dogs at Pittsburgh on the opening Monday night, and it's not going to be easy against Dallas the following week. Another division game against the Giants, and so on and so forth. Bottom line, Redskins schedule much, much tougher this year than it was last year.
So that brings us to money time, play of the day, and I think you know where we're going, Teddy.
Yeah, I have to take Washington under 7.5 wins. In my mind, it is a no-brainer. I do not like this division as a whole, and I don't like the Redskins in particular. I'm not convinced that Kirk Cousins, we saw him in the pressure game last year against Green Bay in the playoffs. Look, they didn't get beat. They got flat out smacked at home against a Packers team that hadn't really been playing good football.
True.
I'm not convinced Cousins is the guy to be the difference maker for Washington in 2016. Take the Redskins under 7.5 wins.
All right, we finish out the week tomorrow with the weekend preview. Good baseball card, PGA Championship, our final major. We can recap that, and we'll get into some fun deep dive in football that you'll want to watch coming up tomorrow as well on SportsBit Betting Insight today.